Nebraska Nebraska, Oklahoma, neutral field, Big 12 championship game. Marco, who do you like? Why do you like them?
Well, I'm going to go with Nebraska, and I feel that Oklahoma left too much on the field last week having to get here to this game.
All right, so they played Oklahoma State, and you actually, unfortunately, well, for me, you liked Oklahoma. I loved Oklahoma State. We bet. I'm going to unfortunately have to pay my bet off on air. Let me ask you this. Oklahoma clearly played well last week. They were an underdog, only the third time since like 2007. They won the game. It was an exciting game, but they should have won. It didn't feel fluky to me. They also played a good game against Baylor the week before on the road. But earlier in the year, they played horribly on the road against Missouri and against Texas A&M. What's going on here?
Well, the thing that sticks out to me with the four games that you mentioned, the last two, Oklahoma State and Baylor, two of the worst defenses in the Big 12 Conference. That's a big equalizer if you can move the ball at ease against a team like that. And they just got into a situation with both of those teams where they couldn't stop them. And Oklahoma's defense was able to make enough stops in both games to get them the wins when they traded points.
So wait a minute. What I'm hearing is the fact that that Missouri and A&M have not horrible defenses. Baylor and Oklahoma State have horrible defenses, and thus you're saying Oklahoma on the road, if they're playing a horrible defense, is just fine, but if they're playing a good defense, their offense can't perform up to snuff.
Absolutely, which is going to be the second part of my handicap in this game.
Well, go ahead. I want to hear this.
This will be, without the shadow of a doubt, the best defense Oklahoma will have faced all year, bar none. Now, Nebraska is going to be handcuffed a bit without Taylor Martinez. We're taping again on Wednesday. The way the line moves, he did not participate in practice, on Monday and Tuesday, very limited. They were saying game time decision, but based on what the line is, I'm handicapping, expecting him not to play.
And what's the line currently?
Line currently is up to Oklahoma 6.5.
Okay, so you're saying overreaction most likely to the quarterback being out. Oklahoma is really playing a type of road game here, and we'll talk about the difference between neutral and road, but they're not at home. We know that. And they have trouble against really good defenses on the road, and thus you're getting some value, and it's a good fundamental matchup.
Right. And the fact that the backup quarterbacks did play last week, so you've got another game under their belt with experience to help. But there's two other factors to this that I'm going to point in here. And I know this first one you could say works both ways. And we're going to talk about the Big 12 and Nebraska exiting the Big 12. I think.
All right, so just to set this up, this is the last game Nebraska will play as a member of the Big 12.
So they would like nothing better than to walk out the door and shut the lights as the Big 12 champion.
It's kind of like in wrestling. There's something called I think it's the Montreal screw job, where there was a wrestler that wanted to leave with the championship. Vince McMahon said you can. He was going to go to the NWA, but they actually acted like he submitted without him actually submitting. So it'd be like Nebraska leaving with the belts up, and then they're gone.
They're gone. But you could also say, well, wouldn't Oklahoma like nothing better to say, don't let the door hit you in the ass on the way out, by knocking them off.
So you're saying that there's going to be heightened motivation on both sides.
Right. So where I'm going to take it to the next level is the fact, and this is something in handicapping I always use as a major factor. If you have a team returning to the national championship game or to the Big 12 championship game or a Super Bowl loser from the year before, heightened motivation when you're placed in that same position this back-to-back years. You don't want to fail twice. And Nebraska.
So there's a chance at redemption.
Absolutely.
Nebraska lost to Texas last year.
A game that many felt they got hosed.
All right, and so you think that increases motivation even more.
And it gives them experience on the big stage.
Yeah, something else that backs you up a little bit. You know, the Big 12 commissioner, Beebe's his name, not like our very own Dan Beebe,
Okay.
is he skipped the Big 12 North Trophy presentation at the Nebraska last week because he had received death threats. So Nebraska, when I was reading some of the actual local newspaper notes on the game, the first half of the article was all about the Big 12 doing wrong by Nebraska, and they left only because Nebraska wasn't given a choice because Texas dominates the Big 12 politically. So I think the Nebraska motivation is probably more than most people think in this spot, which kind of backs you up a little bit. Here's what concerns me. Here's where I would counterpoint that Oklahoma is probably really motivated. One of your pet handicapping theories is the dream crusher. Is once a team loses a game that crushes their dream, like Boise last week, that the next week is their worst performance. I think there's a flip side of that coin, which is if a team really lost its way early, and Oklahoma losing one game pretty much knocked them out of the national championship, and that's what their goal. Mm-hmm. Is now that they're in the Big 12, they're one win away from a BCS game. And it was a tiebreaker that even got them. They had to win on the road at Oklahoma State as a dog, win the tiebreaker with the BCS rankings just to get to this game. You know, I think there's a sense of a renewed dream here. We're going to play in the BCS. I think that doesn't negate your handicap, but I do think Oklahoma is extra motivated too.
Both teams max motivation here in this game, so I really don't think there's a motivational edge to either side.
Our pregame pro, Tony George, did a post, I think it was Sunday night, but I'm not positive about that. It might have been a little bit earlier, where he had, he's in, I think he's in Lincoln actually. He has friends around the program. He said that this quarterback actually texted in his quitting the team. And that it was reported. Actually, our post in the forums got put all around the web. We had like 35,000 views in that one thread within like a half a day, like 8 hours or whatever. And then it ends up that, lo and behold, the next day everything was fine. Tony's connected enough. There was some truth to that. And then you have the whole Coach Pelini and Osborne with his sideline antics. What's your sense of Nebraska? They played really well last week. Do you think this team's distracted or focused?
You're playing for the Big 12 championship. They're going to be focused come Saturday.
All the little stuff doesn't matter.
When they tee it up at the opening kickoff and you hear that crowd, they'll be focused.
Give us your prediction.
I've got Nebraska winning this game 27-23. I'm going to go with the better defense getting points. That's something I love.
I like that, actually. I do. Do you think wait to see if it goes to 7? I do.
You can't lose it. You're not losing anything if it goes back
if it goes
half.
to 6, you're losing some. We don't want people to think every point's valuable, some just more than others.
Right.
But you have more to gain than you have to
You have
lose.
more to gain. The worst, if it goes to 6, the worst, you're looking at a push where you would have had a half-point winner. So you're not actually losing the proposition. But if you get to 7, that's a major, major key number to wait.
I mean, but if the theory is people overreact to quarterbacks being out, why wouldn't the public overreact on game day? A lot of the public won't even know until game day that this quarterback's out.
For sure.
And then I'm laying less than a touchdown. I'm not sure this doesn't go to 7.5.
I would be shocked if it went over that, really.
All right, so you're saying grab it at 7.
If you hit 7, grab it. If it drops to 6, grab it also.
So you're saying once it starts. No, really, let's talk about that a second. You're saying that if before game day it drops to 6, remember 90% of action from the public happens on game day. You think sitting there at 6 that it's a better chance to go to 5.5 than to go to 6.5?
I just wouldn't want to take a chance. It's a bigger number, 6 to 5.5. I wouldn't want to lose the 6 number there.
Yeah, but if 6 is a big number, getting to 6.5 is a big number.
It is, but we're sitting at 6 right now. Right now, we're playing the game like the stock market of where you want to buy and sell. The risk to reward of sitting at 6.5 and hoping it goes to 7 is okay, because if it doesn't, we only go to 6, and I'm not losing that much. I'm not putting myself in a position to lose a bet.
But if it would have went to 6.5, when you take it at 6, you're losing 6.
Right, but I'm also risking the chance that it goes another tick down to 5.5.
Well, that's the whole point. If we knew, that wouldn't be a
Right.
discussion. I think this is going to go to 7. All right, let's talk real quick now. You've given your projection. Let's talk real quick about neutral field handicapping. Here's my take. It's not a home game. We know that. But it's not a road game in that most likely the crowd is going to be pretty mixed. Now, that's an interesting handicap as well. You know, I went to the Steelers Super Bowl 2 years ago. It was 90% Steelers fans. So for the crowd, it was like a home game for Pittsburgh. Assuming that's not the case in a typical neutral field game, my way I look at it as a handicap is you forget the crowd for a minute and you just think about the travel element of it. So in a normal road game, you've got travel, you've got crowd, 2 factors. Here you only have 1, and that can matter because oftentimes for a road team, the crowd is the issue because it's a team that runs a no huddle, and we're actually talking about that in a future video here, is how there's certain teams that run the no huddle a lot better. And you know, that's actually a point that, you know, actually I did write that down. And this actually, I hate to say, but it might go a little against your Nebraska side. I was reading some in-depth stuff on Nebraska. I dug a little deeper on this game too. And they said Nebraska really has trouble with the no huddle. And the Oklahoma State and Iowa State are both teams that run the no huddle, just like Oklahoma does. And Nebraska had trouble against both of them. And the point they were making was that since it's going to be a neutral game, Oklahoma won't have a lot of the trouble that on the road that they do have with their no huddle, which is another reason maybe of that dichotomy of home and road that we talked about. But doubling back, though, to the neutral for a second, some teams, especially passing teams, have more trouble with crowd noise, and I think that going to a neutral is mitigated in that case, but the factors like, you know, going to the hotel and all these other factors are there just as strong. So that's the way I look at it. There's not a lot of neutral games except for bowl season in college football. What about you?
Well, one of the takes that I'll give you that I look at, one, you're going to look at how the team has played in their road games this year, because even though it's not a true road game, it's still not a true home game.
It's closer to a road game than a home game.
Right, so you're going to look at that. But you're going to also look at experience factor of if they've played in these type of games. And both Oklahoma and Nebraska's played in many big bowl games on big stages, so they know that element of that neutral field. But one other element that you have, and this is something we'll discuss more in bowl season, not so much here, but when you have a neutral field, now because this is in the proximity of both teams, you know, because of the conference ties, when you go to a bowl game, you have teams that travel well. I can tell you for a fact, Nebraska, you talked about the Pittsburgh Steelers as an NFL team that travels well. Nebraska is a team that travels very well.
That's true.
Historically.
I was going back, I'll go back in time a little bit, but when when Nebraska played Miami of Florida in the BCS game at the Rose Bowl, I guess it's been 8-9 years ago now, I was at that game and it was 90% Nebraska. So
I can tell you another game that was very embarrassing for the university, but when Nebraska played Notre Dame a few years ago, the Notre Dame alumni were embarrassed at the number of because Notre Dame alumni were selling the tickets because Nebraska people were paying ungodly prices for them.
All right, good stuff. It's your turn to continue the conversation in the comment section with Marco and me. And next up, we're moving to the NFL. We got 2 really big games. Oh, and we've got Atlanta at Tampa Bay coming up next.